When Dominic Rossi heard the maid scream, he expected chaos, just not the kind that made a Mafia king drop to his knees. In a world built on blood and betrayal, he never imagined the one truth that would shatter him was her innocence. Thank you for sticking around with me, and welcome back, my wonderful story family. If you're already hooked in for today's story and ready to enjoy it, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Because tomorrow, I will be giving you another story just as interesting as this one. And you don't want to miss it. Now, back to the story. Chicago's skyline glimmered outside the penthouse windows, all cold steel and dying sunlight, like the city itself was holding its breath, waiting for Dominic Rossi to make his next move. Inside, the air smelled of cigar smoke, spilled whiskey, and the type of secrets that curled under doorways like ghosts. Lena Brooks moved silently between the poker tables, her tray balanced expertly on one hand. Years of nursing school had given her steady hands. Years of poverty had given her quiet eyes. Most days she felt like a shadow in Rossi's home, unseen, unheard, unnoticed. That's how she survived. Tonight, though, survival felt like a luxury. The heads of the 5 families had descended on the penthouse like vultures circling a fresh carcass. The laughter was too loud, the jokes too sharp, and the stakes too high. Money was piled across the tables like fallen snow, and every man in the room carried a gun as easily as he carried a drink. Dominic Rossi sat at the center of it all, broad-shouldered, sharply dressed, tattooed neck disappearing beneath an expensive collar. He had the kind of face sculpted by both genetics and violence. His icy blue eyes flicked across the cards in his hand without ever giving away what he intended to do with them. Lena kept her distance. She'd been working in his penthouse for 6 months and had learned one rule: never get close enough for the butcher to remember your name. She set down a tray of whiskey glasses. None of the men thanked her. They didn't even look at her, except Salvatore De Luca. Sal had the kind of grin that made skin crawl. He'd been watching her all night with piggish eyes, his gold rings flashing whenever he reached for another drink. "Bring me another, sweetheart," he said, tapping the side of his glass. "And don't be shy. Come closer." Lena forced a polite nod, then walked away quickly. Fear sat like ice behind her ribs, but she hid it well. She always did. Dominic didn't look up. He never did. Most days, she was just a moving blur in his periphery, a soft footstep in a violent house. But tonight, someone would force her into the center of his world. Hours passed. More whiskey. More money. More laughter that didn't reach anyone's eyes. When the last round of cards slapped onto the table, the tension in the air wound itself tight like piano wire. Dominic leaned back in his chair, lit a cigar, and watched his opponents fold one by one. He didn't smile when he won. Victory was his default setting. Most of the men staggered out shortly after midnight, escorted by bodyguards, complaining about losing fortunes they could easily replace. But not Sal. Sal stayed behind, swirling the last amber drops in his glass, gaze pinned on Lena like she was a prize he'd already paid for. Lena didn't know he was waiting for her. She carried a tray of empty glasses toward the kitchen, her last task before going home to her tiny rented room on the south side. She'd just reached the counter when the door slammed shut behind her. She froze. Sal's shadow filled the doorframe. "Well, well," he rasped, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. "Aren't you a pretty little thing?" Lena's heart hammered against her ribs. "Mr. De Luca, I still have work to do." He took a step forward. She took a step back. "Relax," he slurred. "Girls who work for the butcher know the arrangement. Service goes beyond cleaning." His hand shot out, gripping her arm. She gasped as he yanked her forward, his breath hot and alcoholic. Her uniform sleeve ripped. Her tray clattered to the floor. She screamed, but not a scream of defiance. A scream of pure terror. A scream that sliced straight through the penthouse. And Dominic Rossi heard it. He appeared in the doorway with the disinterest of a man expecting a nuisance, not danger. "What now?" he sighed. "If she's angling for a payout, Sal, just give her what she wants." Lena shook so violently that her teeth clattered. "No, no, please, Mr. Rossi, I can't, I've never," her voice cracked. I've never been with a man. Silence crashed through the kitchen. Sal barked a laugh. A virgin. In this house. Sure, sweetheart. He reached for her again. Dominic didn't move a muscle. He just stared, really stared at Lena. At the terror in her eyes. The truth trembled in her voice. Something ancient and dark flickered across his face. And at that exact moment, he changed. Before I continue the chapter, here's your mid-scene CTA, woven naturally into the story. Sal snarled. Nobody cares what a maid wants. The world belongs to men like me. He grabbed for her again, and every nerve in Lena's body screamed one truth. Men like Sal thrived because too many people stayed silent. If you can't stand people who use power to crush the vulnerable, comment. Everyone deserves respect. And hit subscribe, because the only ones who won't are the Sals of this world. Dominic took one step forward. His knuckles tightened. His jaw flexed. His eyes turned lethal. And the night, quiet, tense, electric, prepared to explode. Lena Brooks didn't remember the moment Dominic carried her out of the kitchen. 1 second, she was pressed against the marble counter, shaking so violently she thought her bones might rattle loose. The next, she was in his arms. Real arms. Strong. Warm. Terrifyingly gentle. She heard shouting behind her. Sal screaming obscenities and clutching his bleeding hand. Dominic's men were dragging his heavy body down the hallway like a useless sack of flour no one had ordered. The 5 families were whispering in the other room, stunned that the Butcher of Chicago had just declared war over a maid. In the middle of all that chaos, Dominic Rossi whispered to her like she was made of glass. Easy. I won't drop you. Funny, because Lena had just watched him drop a mob boss without blinking. He kicked his bedroom door open with his foot and set her softly on the edge of the bed. Then he stepped back, running a hand through his hair as if he were the one on the verge of fainting. It took her several seconds to find her breath again. Her sleeve was torn. Her shoulder was bruised. Her nerves shredded like confetti shot out of a malfunctioning cannon. Dominic stared at her, the same man who once told a lieutenant, I don't do sympathy. I barely have patience. Yet there he stood, silent, stunned, studying her like she was an equation he suddenly couldn't solve. Lena pulled his jacket tighter around her chest, trembling. Sir, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cause trouble. Trouble, Dominic repeated slowly, as the word offended him. He leaned forward, bracing his hands on his knees, his face inches from hers. You think you caused trouble? His voice dropped, deep and dark. Lena, Sal caused trouble. And men who cause trouble in my house lose the ability to cause it again. Her heart stalled. You shot him, she whispered. I shot his hand. Trust me, sweetheart. If I wanted him dead, he wouldn't have had time to scream. Sweetheart. The nickname slipped out, and the way his jaw tightened afterward told her he hadn't meant to say it. Dominic stood abruptly, pacing like a lion let out of a too small cage. You should have told me. Told you what? She whispered. That you were. He stopped, face contorting like the word wouldn't come out. That you were innocent. She blinked slowly. That's not something I tell people. Well, maybe you should have told me, Dominic snapped. She flinched. Immediately he froze, eyes sharp, guilt flickering across his face. I didn't mean to yell. He said it quietly, almost awkwardly, as if apologizing made him itch. Lena, I didn't know. I didn't know what you were dealing with here. With us. With men like Sal. She lowered her gaze. I didn't think you'd care. That did something to him. His breath hitched. His fists clenched. He stepped closer, voice gentle but rough around the edges. I care now. Those 3 words were more shocking than the gunshot. Lena lifted her eyes to his, hesitant, searching, and afraid to believe him. Dominic exhaled hard and ran a hand over his face. You're not going back to the maid's quarters. What? You're staying here. In the main suite. Where can I keep an eye on you? Her brows shot up. I don't think that's appropriate. Appropriate? He scoffed. Lena, A man almost assaulted you in my home. Appropriate left the building 2 hours ago. She opened her mouth to argue. He raised a hand. No. Non-negotiable. That was the end of that debate. Dominic stepped toward her, slower this time. He knelt again, something the Mafia would never believe unless they saw it with their own eyes, and took her wrist gently. Did he hurt you anywhere else? No, she whispered. Good. His shoulders relaxed slightly, as if that alone kept Chicago from burning. He looked at her for a long moment, longer than any man ever had. Lena, he said quietly. Yes. I'm sorry. She nearly passed out. Dominic Rossi, apologizing? The apocalypse must have been scheduled for next week. He glanced at the bedroom door, jaw tightening. They'll talk, he muttered. Everyone will talk. About me. Lena whispered. No. About me. About how I reacted. About how I protected you. They'll say I've gone soft. And have you? She asked before her brain could stop her. His eyes locked onto hers. Blue, piercing, unreadable. For you, he said bluntly. I think I might have. Her breath caught. Before she could respond, Nico, his right-hand man, burst into the room. Boss. Nico froze mid-step when he saw Lena on the bed and Dominic kneeling in front of her like a knight from a very bloody fairy tale. Oh, Nico said slowly. This looks like a moment. Dominic stood up so fast he almost flipped the mattress. Nico. Talk. Now. Nico cleared his throat. The families want answers about Sal. They can wait. And there's something else. Nico hesitated. Sal made a call before he came to the penthouse. Someone from New York is asking questions about a girl. A girl connected to your maid. Lena's blood went cold. Dominic turned to her sharply. Lena, he said carefully. Is there something you need to tell me? She swallowed hard. Her nightmare was catching up. The past she thought she buried. The enemy her brother tried, and failed to stop. She lifted her eyes to Dominic, her voice trembling. They're coming for me. Dominic stepped closer, eyes blazing. Then let them come. They'll leave Chicago in a body bag. If you can't stand men like Sal, men who abuse power, prey on the vulnerable, and think fear equals control. Comment, I stand with Lena. Only cowards and bullies will stay silent. Dominic Rossi didn't scare easily. But the way Lena said, they're coming for me. That did something to him. It sliced through his ribs and planted itself deep, like a blade he hadn't seen coming. He moved closer, not touching her but close enough that she could feel the heat radiating off him. The butcher of Chicago, suddenly careful with proximity. Start from the beginning, Dominic said, voice low. Controlled. Dangerous. Who's looking for you? Lena's fingers tightened around his jacket draped over her shoulders. It's complicated. Dominic crouched again, but this time his tone was different. Gentler, coaxing, almost protective. Lena, complicated people don't make New York call Chicago in the middle of the night. So talk to me. She drew a shaky breath. My brother didn't steal from you for himself, she whispered. He stole because someone threatened me. Dominic's jaw tightened. Who? She hesitated. The name tasted like metal and fear. Dmitry Orlov. Dominic froze. Nico, standing behind him, muttered. Oh, for F, we're dead. Dominic shot him a glare so sharp it could have shaved ice. But Lena didn't notice. She was staring at the floor, shoulders curling inward. He wanted me, she whispered. And when I refused, he said he'd take me anyway. My brother thought that if he bought time, we could escape. But Dmitry doesn't lose. Dominic stood slowly, expression hardening into stone. Dmitry Orlov, he repeated. The Bratva's golden psychopath. He called himself a businessman, Lena said weakly. He's a businessman the same way a shark is a swimmer, Dominic snapped. Technically true, but that's not the headline. She tried to smile at the joke. It came out crooked, heartbreaking. Dominic ran a hand through his hair, pacing. He traffics women. Buys them. Sells them. Thinks he owns the world. Dominic stopped. And he threatened you. That's why my brother stole the drugs, Lena said softly. He thought he could use them to negotiate. Negotiate with Orloff? Dominic scoffed. You negotiate with dogs, not wolves. Nico added, and Orloff's not even a wolf. He's like a wolf who skipped therapy and discovered grenades. Lena flinched. Dominic shot Nico a look. Not helping. Nico shrugged. Just painting the picture. Dominic returned his focus to Lena. You should have told me earlier. I didn't think you'd believe me. I believe you now, Dominic said, and there was zero hesitation in his voice. Not one crack. Not one doubt. Lena rubbed her arms nervously. I didn't want to bring any of this to your doorstep. You're in my house, Dominic said firmly. Which means your problems are my problems. Nico blinked. Boss, since when? Dominic ignored him entirely. Lena, he said, softer now, you weren't a burden. You were in danger. And you were alone. His voice dropped lower. You're not alone anymore. Her eyes glistened, and he could practically feel his heart folding itself into origami. We'll handle Orloff, he added. We, she whispered. Dominic's jaw set with terrifying certainty. You think I'm letting a Bratva scumbag take what's mine to protect? Lena inhaled sharply. What you protected, he corrected quickly. Ears going slightly pink. I meant your safety. I'm responsible for it. Nico raised an eyebrow. Wow. Big difference there, boss. Really subtle. Dominic leveled him with a death stare that promised creative violence later. Then he turned back to Lena. I'm doubling security. No one enters this penthouse unless I approve it. Not even my crew. And you don't leave my sight until I'm sure Orloff is not breathing Chicago air. Lena shook her head. You can't start a war because of me. I've started wars for less. But this. Lena. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. If Orloff comes for you, I'll end him. Her breath trembled. Why are you doing this? Dominic didn't have an answer. Not one he knew how to say. He opened his mouth, silence. He tried again, nothing. Nico coughed. Boss. You good? Your face is doing that weird thing again. What weird thing? Dominic snapped. That thing where you look like you're feeling something. Dominic glared. I'm not. Lena watched them, a tiny hint of amusement flickering through her fear. Dominic sighed, defeated. Lena, you didn't deserve what happened tonight. And you sure as hell don't deserve what's coming after you. So I'm stepping in. She swallowed. But you barely noticed me before tonight. He froze. I noticed you. She lifted a brow. Not in the way you think, he added quickly. You keep my house running. You don't complain. You don't gossip. You don't flirt. You don't manipulate. You're, he exhaled slowly. Different. Different. He said it like it was sacred. Nico tapped his phone. Boss Orloff's men just touched down at O'Hare. Lena gasped. Dominic cracked his neck. Good. He smiled, cold and sharp. Let them try. Lena grabbed his sleeve. Please don't get hurt for me. He looked down at her hand like it was the first time anyone had ever touched him without fear or obligation. I don't plan on getting hurt, he said softly. I plan on making them regret ever knowing your name. And for the first time in her life, Lena believed a promise spoken by a dangerous man. Because Dominic didn't say it like a threat. He said it like a vow. If you can't stand cowards like Orloff, men who prey on women and call it power, hit the like button. Only people who secretly admire villains stay quiet. The Rossi penthouse had survived shootouts, betrayals, drunken mobsters, and one unfortunate night involving 3 strippers, a python, and a malfunctioning smoke alarm. But it had never held the kind of silence it held after Dominic learned Orloff's men had landed in Chicago. It felt like the walls themselves were holding their breath. Dominic moved first. He strode across the living room with laser focus, every step purposeful, every muscle coiled with lethal intention. Lena followed behind him, unsure whether she should stand close, stay back, hide in a closet, or simply evaporate into thin air. "Sit," Dominic said, pointing to the leather sofa. It wasn't a request. She sat. He crouched in front of her again, twice in one night. His men would need therapy. "Lena," he said slowly, "I need you to listen very carefully." She nodded. "From this moment on, you're not leaving this penthouse without Nico. And even then, only if I say so." "But I have classes," she whispered. "I have my job at the hospital." Dominic's eyes snapped up sharply. "You're not going anywhere. Not until I deal with Orloff. But I'll get kicked out of school. I'll buy the school. Dominic. Then I'll buy the hospital. Dominic. Then I'll buy the entire state of Illinois if that's what it takes to keep you alive." She blinked. "Is that a thing you can do?" "Sweetheart," he said with a tired sigh, "if you have enough money and no moral compass, you can do anything." Nico nodded from the doorway. "Facts." Lena rubbed her temples like she suddenly regretted ever speaking. "Dominic, I can't just stop living because of him," she insisted. "I won't hide while people get hurt trying to protect me." "You're not hiding," he said firmly. "You're surviving. And you. What are you doing?" "Preparing." Something was unnerving about how calmly he said it. Like he wasn't fazed. Like violence was simply an item on his to-do list. Nico re-entered with a tablet. "Boss, you have to see this." Dominic took it. On the screen was surveillance footage from O'Hare, a group of men in black trench coats, buzz cuts and stone faces, and the emotional expressiveness of a filing cabinet. Bratva. They walked like men immune to fear. Lena gasped softly. Dominic watched them with the sneer of someone planning multiple funerals. "They're not going to walk into my city and think they can take what's under my protection," he muttered. Lena hugged his coat tighter. "Dominic. What if I'm not worth all this?" His head whipped toward her so fast that Nico flinched. "Don't ever say that again." "But I'm just your maid." His voice dropped to a dark, quiet intensity that melted straight into her bones. "You were never just anything." Her breath caught. "You're the only person in this house who treats everyone like they still have a soul. You work yourself raw and don't complain. You're smart. You're calm. You're brave when you shouldn't have to be." He leaned in a little. "And most of all, you're honest. In a world built on lies." Nico snorted. "Boss out here sounding like Shakespeare." "Get out," Dominic growled without breaking eye contact. Nico left immediately. Lena looked at Dominic, really looked. Not at the Mafia boss. Not at the man feared by half the country. But at the man kneeling in front of her twice in one night, putting his body between hers and danger. "I don't want anyone hurt because of me," she whispered. Dominic reached up, gently pushing a curl from her face. "You let me worry about that." She opened her mouth, but before she could speak, Dominic's phone buzzed. He checked it. His eyes went flat. "What?" Lena asked softly. Dominic stood. "They're not waiting to make a move." Nico ran back in. "Boss, they're already in the building." Lena's blood turned to ice. "What does that mean?" she whispered. Dominic didn't answer her directly. Instead, he turned to Nico. "She stays behind me at all times." "Yes, boss." Then Dominic reached for a gun tucked behind his back. Lena's breath hitched, not in fear of him, but of the world he was about to walk into. "Dominic," she whispered, reaching for his arm. He froze. Her hand was small, warm, and trembling. The kind of touch he wasn't used to. Gentle, hesitant, trusting. "Be careful," she said. His expression softened for half a second. A rare, fleeting, human moment carved from steel. "I'm always careful," he murmured. Nico coughed. "Since when?" "Shut up." Dominic turned to Lena again. "I'll be back," he promised. "And when I return, Orloff won't be a problem anymore." She nodded, though her heart thrashed like a trapped bird. Dominic moved toward the hallway. Then paused. Looked back. and said something he'd never said to any woman, not once in his life. "Don't be afraid. Not while I'm alive." Then he and Nico disappeared into the dark corridor that led to the building's security floors. The door shut behind them, leaving Lena in the silent penthouse, clutching his jacket, pulse shaking through her entire body. And outside the door, footsteps approached. Slow, heavy, unfamiliar. Not Dominic's. Not Nico's. Someone else. Someone who didn't belong here. Someone who was coming straight for her. If you refuse to let people like Orloff win, if you're not on the side of abusers, predators, and men who think fear is power, comment, "I stand with Lena." Silence is exactly what villains like him count on. The footsteps were wrong. Too heavy to be Nico. Too slow to be Dominic. Too calm to be afraid. Lena froze on the sofa, clutching Don's suit jacket like a lifeline. Her heartbeat pounded so loudly she wondered if the intruder could hear it through the walls. Another step. Then another. Whoever it was, they moved with the confidence of someone who believed the world bent for them. Someone who expected doors to open, people to shrink, and lives to bow. A Bratva man. Or worse, someone working for Orloff who didn't fear walking straight into Dominic Rossi's home. Lena scanned the room for something. Anything she could use as a weapon. The fireplace poker? Too far. The decorative vase? Too fragile. Dominic's tailored suit jacket? Not exactly lethal unless fashion crimes counted. The footsteps stopped outside the living room entrance. A low male voice hummed thoughtfully. "Well, well." Lena's pulse stumbled. He stepped into the room. Tall. Thick shoulders. Cold blue eyes that looked like they were carved from glacier ice. A scar stretched across his cheek like a cracked sidewalk. His leather coat still dripped with melted snow, and he carried the calm menace of a man who didn't believe consequences applied to him. Definitely Bratva. "Hello, little bird," he said gently, like he was greeting a child holding a balloon instead of a terrified woman clutching a jacket. "You must be the girl." Lena swallowed hard. "What do you want?" The man smiled. It wasn't warm. "Everything Orloff wants," he answered casually. "And everything Rossi thinks he can keep from us." He walked closer. Lena backed up until her legs hit the arm of the sofa. He tilted his head, studying her with a disturbing curiosity. "You don't look like much," he murmured. "But he has half the city on alert. Interesting. Men like Rossi don't protect women like you unless—" He trailed off, eyes sliding down her trembling form. "Unless you matter." Lena forced her voice not to crack. "I don't matter. I'm just the maid." He smiled softly. "No. You're something else." She didn't dare breathe. "You're leverage." He reached for her. The moment his fingers brushed the air near her shoulder, the elevator door behind him slammed open with a metallic punch. He spun. Too late. Dominic Rossi hit him like a missile. The Bratva thug flew across the room, crashing into the marble countertop with a grunt. Before he could recover, Dominic was on him again, fist smashing into his jaw with a crunch that echoed like thunder. "You walk into my home?" Dominic roared. Another punch. "You threaten her?" A knee to the ribs. "You breathe in her direction?" A final blow to the throat had the man collapsing, wheezing, blood spilling from his mouth. Nico burst into the room right behind Dominic, gun raised. "Boss, are you good?" "I'm fine," Dominic snapped, then immediately turned toward Lena. She was still pressed against the sofa, trembling, eyes huge. Dominic crossed the room in 3 strides. "Are you hurt?" he demanded. She shook her head fast. "No, no, he didn't touch me." Dominic looked her over anyway, checking her arms, her hands, and her face, like he needed proof she was still whole. His touch was rough, frantic, overflowing with a fear he would rather die than admit. Only when he found no injuries did his shoulders drop slightly. "Good," he breathed. "Good." Behind them, the Bratva man groaned weakly. "Wrong move." Dominic turned on him with a glare sharp enough to slice bone. Nico stepped forward. "Boss, want me to finish him?" Dominic didn't answer immediately. He kept his eyes on Lena, measuring her fear, her shaking hands, and the way she tried to hide it. He wasn't just furious. He was unhinged. "No," Dominic said finally, voice flat. "He's not dying here." Nico blinked. "He's not." Dominic's gaze hardened into ice. "He's going to deliver a message." He grabbed the Bratva thug by the collar, dragging him to his feet with terrifying ease. "You tell Orloff," Dominic growled into the man's ear, "that the girl is under my protection. You tell him if he wants her, he needs to walk into my world himself." He shoved the man toward Nico. "And you tell him he has 3 days to back out of Chicago, or I end his entire bloodline." The thug stumbled, dazed, terrified, dripping blood. Nico marched him to the elevator. As the doors closed, Dominic's eyes never left Lena. When they were finally alone, she exhaled shakily. "Dominic, why did you come back so fast? I thought you were on the lower floors." "I was," he said. "But you. I heard you scream." She blinked. "I didn't scream." He stepped closer, voice lowering. "You didn't have to." The room was silent. Thick. Heavy. Electric. Dominic brushed a trembling curl from her cheek with the back of his finger. "Do you understand now?" he asked quietly. "Why can't you go anywhere? Why can't you be alone?" Her throat tightened. "Because of my brother?" "No." His voice was absolute, dangerously soft. "Because of you." Her breath caught. He lifted her chin gently. "Lena Brooks," he murmured. "If anything happens to you, Chicago won't survive what I do next." They stood there, inches apart, fear and heat and adrenaline tangled between them. Nico stormed back into the room. "Boss, small issue. Orloff just called. He says if we want peace." Nico paused, face contorting. "We have to hand over Lena." Dominic laughed. A dark, murderous sound. "Peace?" he echoed. "He thinks I want peace." Nico swallowed. "So what should I tell him?" Dominic didn't hesitate. "Tell him," he said coldly, "that if he touches her, even in his imagination, I'll burn Moscow from memory." Lena felt her knees weaken. Because Dominic wasn't bluffing. Not even a little. If you're not on the side of creeps like Orloff, men who think fear permits them, comment, "I stand with Lena." Trolls and cowards stay silent. The penthouse felt different after the Bratva man was dragged out. Quieter. Sharper. Like the walls themselves were listening. Nico stalked the perimeter with his gun out, barking orders into his earpiece. More enforcers rushed into the building. The elevator was shut down. Every window was scanned. Every hallway is guarded. But Lena didn't feel safe. Not because of the Bratva. Because of the man standing in front of her. Dominic Rossi, with his jaw clenched tight and something volcanic simmering beneath the surface. He wasn't pacing. He wasn't yelling. He wasn't even breathing normally. He was thinking. And that scared her more than anything. "Lena." His voice finally broke the silence. The way he said her name, low, deliberate, made her pulse trip. "Your brother stole from me 3 months ago." Her breath caught. Here it comes. The blame. The anger. The accusation. Dominic wasn't a man who forgot debts. But instead of glaring at her, he turned away, toward the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lake Michigan. His hands gripping the railing so tight the veins in his arms bulged. "You didn't do anything wrong," he said quietly. Lena blinked. "What?" He didn't turn. "Your brother didn't steal from me because he wanted money. He stole because someone forced his hand." He exhaled sharply. "Someone who wanted you." Her stomach dropped. "Someone who wanted me." Finally, Dominic faced her. His eyes were raw. Unfiltered rage and something else, something she didn't recognize, burned behind them. "Yes," he said. "You." Lena shook her head hard. "No, that makes no sense. Why would anyone?" "Because innocence is currency in my world." His tone was almost bitter. "Because there are men who believe purity can be owned. Because there are monsters who have spent years collecting what they think they deserve." The room felt colder. Dominic stepped toward her, but not too close. Just enough that she felt his presence like a heat she shouldn't want but couldn't ignore. "You were never invisible," he said. "Not to the wrong people." Lena wrapped her arms around herself. "And to you," she whispered. "Was I invisible to you?" Dominic went absolutely still. Then he laughed. Just once. Dark and humorless. "Lena, if you had any idea what I've been trying not to see." He cut himself off. A muscle in his jaw twitched. "I noticed you the first day," he said, voice rough. "The way you apologized when you weren't at fault. The way you lowered your eyes to avoid trouble. The way you carried shame that didn't belong to you." He took a step closer. "You weren't invisible," he said. "You were untouchable." Her pulse fluttered. "Untouchable." "Because if I touched you," he said, "I'd ruin you." The words weren't crude. They were terrified. Dominic Rossi, the butcher, was afraid of himself. Lena swallowed. "Dominic, I'm not asking you to." "I know." He dragged a hand through his hair. "That's the worst part." Before she could answer, Nico appeared in the doorway, breathless. "Boss. Problem." Dominic's attention snapped instantly. "What now?" "It's Orloff." Nico swallowed. He didn't just call. He sent something. "What?" A video." Dominic's face darkened. "Put it on." Nico hesitated. "Boss, maybe Lena shouldn't." "Put it on." Nico tapped the TV screen. The large monitor on the wall flickered to life. The video was grainy, shaky, recorded in what looked like a warehouse. A man knelt on the concrete. Hands zip-tied. Face bruised. Lena gasped. Darren," she whispered. Her brother. Alive. But barely. A large, shadowy figure stepped into frame. Orloff. He crouched beside Darren, gripping his chin. In Ukrainian-accented English, Orloff spoke slowly. "You stole from Rossi to buy your sister time." He smirked. "Time is up." Dominic's breathing changed. A deadly, animal sound. Orloff stared into the camera. "Rossi. Hand over the girl." He yanked Darren's head back. "Or I start taking pieces." The video cut. Silence. Thick. Ice cold. Unbreathable. Lena covered her mouth, shaking so hard she nearly collapsed. Dominic moved before she did. He caught her. Held her upright. Held her like she was something precious. Something breakable. Something he would kill the entire world to protect. "We'll get him back," Dominic murmured, voice low and lethal. "I swear to you." Lena's tears spilled. "You don't understand," she whispered. "Darren isn't like you. He's not strong, he's not violent. He's scared of needles, Dominic, he's just." "Your brother," Dominic said. "And therefore mine." She blinked. "What?" He cupped her jaw, steadying her. "You think I'd protect you and leave your blood behind?" "No." His voice roughened. "Darren Brooks is under my protection now." He turned toward Nico. "Get every soldier ready," he commanded. "We're going to war tonight." Nico nodded and vanished. Lena tried to speak, but Dominic stopped her gently. "I'm not losing you," he said. "Not a promise. A threat to the universe." "Dominic," Lena whispered. "Why are you doing all this for me?" He looked at her like the answer was too simple to voice. But he said it anyway. "Because someone pure walked into my world," he murmured. "And for the first time in my life, I want to be worthy of something." Her knees almost gave out. Dominic steadied her again. And in the middle of all that fear, she realized. The most dangerous man in Chicago wasn't her enemy. He was becoming her shield. If you'd never side with a man like Orloff, who hurts the helpless, hit subscribe now. Only cowards relate to him. Brave souls stand with Lena. Comment justice for Darren, if you want the rescue to come fast. The city stretched below them, lights twinkling like distant stars, but up here in the penthouse, the air felt electric. charged with urgency, danger, and something that had nothing to do with the night sky. Dominic moved with purpose, every step measured, a predator stalking a world that had suddenly become too small to contain the threat. Lena followed, her hands trembling, not from fear of him, but because of what he represented. Safety wrapped in lethal force. "Tell me everything," Dominic said, voice low and controlled but with an edge that made her swallow hard. Lena took a deep breath. "Orloff, he's not just a gangster. He's methodical. Strategic. He doesn't just take. He breaks. Darren. He's hurt worse than you saw in the video. And..." Her words faltered. "And he's going to do more if he doesn't get what he wants." Dominic's jaw tightened. "Where is he?" She shook her head. "I don't know. He moves too fast, too clean. Always one step ahead. I tried tracking him. I couldn't." Dominic didn't move for a moment. Then he exhaled sharply, as if expelling the city itself through his lungs. "Good," he said finally. "That means we'll have the element of surprise. And I never lose when I'm unseen." Lena followed him into the command room, where maps, blueprints, and monitors covered every surface. Soldiers were stationed, moving with quiet precision. Nico briefed Dominic on the known variables. Orloff's recent movements, safehouses, and possible accomplices. Dominic scanned everything, processing faster than Lena could comprehend. Each piece of intel was a puzzle, and he was solving it without hesitation. Finally, he turned to her, his gaze intense. "You stay here. Safe. Under lock and key if I have to. You're my leverage and my compass, Lena. One step out of line and..." "You won't leave me," she interrupted. "You're not letting me just sit here while Darren..." Dominic's eyes softened, just slightly, just enough to remind her why she hadn't run from him before. "I'm not letting anyone touch you. That's the point. You're untouchable. Because I'm dangerous enough to make sure of it." Her pulse spiked. She couldn't decide if it terrified her or thrilled her, or both. Before she could speak, the monitors flickered. A shadow appeared on one of the feeds. Someone moving with intent. "Is that..." she started. Dominic's hand shot out, gripping her shoulder. "Don't breathe." He stepped toward the screen, reading the movements like a book, each second etched into his mind. "They're coming for us. Now." The room erupted into controlled chaos. Enforcers grabbed positions, weapons clicked into readiness, and the penthouse transformed into a battlefield. Dominic pulled Lena behind a steel beam. His hand was firm and protective. "Stay here. Don't move." Lena's lips parted, but he silenced her with a glance sharp enough to cut glass. Then he was gone. A flash of motion, a blur of controlled violence. The next moments were chaos and silence intertwined. The sounds of struggle echoed from the hallways outside. Heavy boots, muffled shouts, and the low hum of Dominic's controlled rage. And Lena. She just held onto the beam, heart racing, pulse deafening in her ears, as she realized what she had always suspected. The man who could crush cities, who could destroy lives with a thought, had become something she didn't need to fear. Not entirely. She needed him. The thought was dangerous. Forbidden. Necessary. And in the shadows of that penthouse, with the city breathing beneath them, Lena understood that nothing, no threat, no enemy, no monster, was greater than the force Dominic Rossi had become for her. If you believe Lena deserves protection against monsters like Orloff, hit subscribe. Type Rossi protects in the comments if you're ready to see him move against Orloff. The city outside never slept, but inside the penthouse, time had slowed, every second stretched, heavy with anticipation. Dominic returned moments later, a storm barely contained in his eyes. He moved differently now, less measured, more animal, ready to strike, ready to destroy anyone who dared cross him. Lena felt it in the air, like the calm before lightning splits the sky. "Lena," he said, voice low, roughened by adrenaline. "We leave in 5. Every second we wait gives Orloff more leverage. And I never let anyone hold leverage over me, or mine." She swallowed. Where are we going?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he walked past the monitors, past Nico and the soldiers, stopping only when he faced her. His presence was magnetic, dangerous, and consuming. "We're going into his world," he said finally. "Into Orloff's nest. I want Darren back. Whole. Alive. And I want Orloff to understand that he doesn't touch anyone under my protection without paying the cost." Lena's stomach tightened. "You can't guarantee he'll survive." Dominic's hand lifted, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "I don't make guarantees. I make threats. I make sure the people who deserve fear feel it." Her pulse quickened. Not with fear, though there was some, but because being near him was like standing next to a controlled explosion. She felt the power radiating off him, and a strange warmth behind it, the unspoken promise that he would keep her safe, no matter what. Nico interrupted, voice clipped. "Boss, convoys are ready. Weapons loaded. Entry points secured. We're green." Dominic nodded, eyes scanning every detail, memorizing every angle. "Good. Let's move." The convoy rolled through the streets, silent engines and tighter formations. Lena watched Dominic from the back of the armored SUV, his hands tight on the wheel, jaw set, and eyes scanning constantly. Every muscle coiled like a predator's, ready to strike. She dared to ask, her voice barely audible. "Dominic, are you afraid?" He didn't answer immediately. Then, without looking at her, he murmured, "Not of them. Not of the men who think they're monsters. The only thing I fear is losing control. Losing you." Her chest tightened. Words failed her. She had never heard a confession like that. Not from anyone, certainly not someone like Dominic Rossi. They arrived at the warehouse at night, shadowed and silent, the building looming like a tomb. Dominic's soldiers fanned out, securing every perimeter. Lena stayed behind him, her heartbeat loud in the darkness, a constant reminder that she was alive, and in the hands of a man who would kill the world for her. "Stay here," Dominic said, voice low but firm. "And if you value your life, don't move until I tell you." She nodded, unable to look away as he melted into the shadows, leaving only the promise of his wrath behind. Minutes stretched like hours. Every creak of the floor and every distant footstep made Lena's pulse pound. And then a sharp, deliberate shout cut through the night. "Darren!" She recognized her brother's voice, weak, strained, but alive. Her heart leapt, hope igniting. Dominic reappeared moments later, dragging Darren behind him, bruised and exhausted, but breathing. His hand was firm on Lena's brother, guiding, protecting, and guarding. "Boss!" Nico's voice was tinged with relief. Dominic didn't respond immediately. His eyes were on Lena, dark and intense, unreadable. And in that moment she understood. He had crossed into Orloff's world, touched the darkness, faced the monsters, and come back for her family. Her knees threatened to buckle. Dominic caught her instinctively. His grip was steady, unyielding. "You're safe," he said simply. And in that one sentence, Lena realized the truth. Dominic Rossi wasn't just a shield. He was a force of nature. A reckoning. A man who had stepped into the darkness so she and her brother could see the light. Hit subscribe if you want to see Dominic face Orloff head on. Comment "Bring Orloff down" to join Lena and Darren's fight for justice. Absolutely. Continuing the story in the same dark, tense, and emotional style, here's Chapter 9. The warehouse was silent once more, but silence was a fragile thing, a brittle veneer over the chaos Dominic had left in his wake. Darren leaned against the wall, bruised and trembling, but alive. Lena clutched his arm, relief mixing with fear. Dominic stood a few feet away, surveying the scene. His presence was a storm barely contained. Every line of his body taut, every muscle coiled, ready for anything. Even in victory, he was danger incarnate. "Are you hurt?" Lena whispered, moving to her brother. "Nothing serious," Darren muttered, wincing as he tried to stand taller than he felt. Dominic's gaze didn't waver from the shadows beyond the warehouse. Orloff was still out there, watching, waiting, planning. And Dominic's mind was already calculating the next move, every possibility, every risk, and every strike. "You did well," Dominic said finally, voice low and deliberate. "Better than I expected." Darren blinked. I didn't do anything. Dominic's eyes cut to him, sharp and unwavering. You survived. That counts. Lena's attention snapped to Dominic. And Orloff. He'll pay, Dominic said simply, almost coldly. But beneath the surface, there was a fire, a promise that he would stop at nothing to dismantle the man who had dared touch his world. He turned to Lena, his expression unreadable, but the intensity of his gaze pinned her in place. You two are coming with me. No. I have a place where you'll be untouchable. Where Orloff can't reach you, at least not easily. As they moved through the night streets, the city blurred past, distant lights reflecting in Dominic's eyes. Hard, calculating, unstoppable. Lena rode beside him in silence, heart hammering, torn between fear and fascination. Every inch of him radiated power, danger, and something softer. Something meant only for her. Dominic, she finally whispered. Why do you care so much? His jaw tightened. Because someone like you doesn't belong in my world. And because once you walked into it, I realized I'd rather die than let anything happen to you. Her pulse quickened. Not from fear, but from the raw, terrifying sincerity in his words. They arrived at a secluded safe house, fortified, silent, and nearly invisible from the outside. Inside, it was stark, efficient, but secure, everything a fortress needed to be when protecting something precious. Dominic didn't waste time with pleasantries. He secured the perimeter, stationed his men, and finally turned to Lena and Darren. You stay here. Don't leave this room unless I say so. If Orloff thinks he can touch you, he'll pay with more than fear. He'll pay with his life. Lena's hands trembled, but she nodded. Darren looked between them, awe and fear mirrored in his wide eyes. Before leaving the room, Dominic leaned close to Lena. His voice dropped to a whisper, intimate and dangerous. I'll make Orloff regret ever thinking he could threaten what belongs to me. She swallowed hard. His closeness, the weight of his presence, the unspoken promise in his tone. It made her knees weak and made her pulse wild. And in that moment, she realized something terrifyingly simple. The man who could destroy worlds had chosen to protect her. Outside, the city waited. Dark, cold, ruthless. But Dominic Rossi had stepped into the shadows, and Lena knew he would burn the night itself before letting anyone harm her or her brother again. Subscribe now to watch Dominic take the fight directly to Orloff. Comment Rossi strikes if you're ready for the next move. The night air outside the safe house was sharp and biting, but Dominic didn't feel it. His focus was absolute. Orloff had overstepped, and now he would pay. Every plan, every soldier, every weapon in his arsenal was moving toward one goal: to end the threat before it could touch Lena or Darren again. Inside, Lena and Darren waited, huddled together, the tension thick enough to taste. Lena's hands trembled, but not entirely from fear. Being near Dominic, knowing the storm he carried, was intoxicating. Dangerous. Minutes felt like hours. Then, the quiet was shattered. Dominic returned, silent as a shadow, his coat barely brushing the floor. His eyes scanned the room, stopping on Lena. The heat in them wasn't just anger. It was a warning, a promise. Everything's in place, he said, voice low and controlled. Orloff doesn't know we're here. But he will soon. Darren swallowed hard. He's not going to hurt us, is he? Dominic's gaze softened, just slightly, enough to reassure them. Not while I'm breathing. Not while I'm in this world. You're mine now. That means anyone who touches you will regret it. Lena's heart lurched at the words. There was danger in them, yes, but also a strange comfort. Being claimed by someone who could destroy everything and still make the choice to protect her. Then he was gone again, moving like a shadow through the night, leaving Lena and Darren to wait and wonder. Hours passed. The city outside hummed, oblivious to the battle about to erupt in its streets. Then the call came in. Nico's voice. Clipped, urgent. Boss, he's moving. Orloff's convoy is on the outskirts. Dominic's fingers tightened around the comm, position the men. No mistakes. Orloff doesn't get a second chance. Lena's pulse spiked. She had never seen him like this. Cold, lethal, and utterly in command. It was terrifying and yet necessary. Minutes later, the first shadows appeared on the horizon. Orloff's men, moving fast, confident, and unaware of the trap that awaited. Dominic's soldiers took position silently, like predators surrounding prey. Dominic stepped forward, hand on his gun. His eyes burned with a dangerous light, scanning the darkness, calculating every move before it happened. Lena felt the magnetic pull of his presence, the weight of his power, and the terrifying promise behind it. Nothing would touch her. The first gunshot rang out. The night erupted into controlled chaos. Bullets, shouts, and the clash of steel and flesh. And in the center of it all, Dominic moved with inhuman precision, every step a deadly dance. He was the storm incarnate, a shadow no one could predict, a force no one could stop. Lena watched from the safehouse window, breath caught, heart hammering. She realized then what she had always feared. Dominic Rossi wasn't just dangerous, he was absolute. And she couldn't imagine the world without him holding the line between life and death. And as the battle raged outside, she whispered to Darren, This is why he's ours. And why nothing, no one can take him from us." Subscribe now to see Dominic confront Orloff and claim justice. Comment Rossi wins if you're ready for the showdown. The streets of Chicago were no longer familiar. They had become a battlefield under Dominic's control. Shadows shifted, engines rumbled, and the night held its breath, waiting for the storm that had been unleashed. Dominic moved like a phantom, each step precise and calculated, every movement designed to cut Orloff off before he could react. His soldiers fanned out behind him, silent and deadly, as if the entire city itself had bent to his will. Inside the safehouse, Lena pressed herself against the wall, Darren clinging to her side. The distant sounds of gunfire and shouts made her stomach twist, but she didn't feel fear. Not entirely. Not with Dominic out there. "Boss." Nico's voice crackled over the comm, tense but controlled. "We've got eyes on Orloff. He's pinned, moving into a dead zone. No exit. It's all on you now." Dominic's jaw tightened. "Good. Make sure no one leaves. And no civilians get caught in this." Lena bit her lip, watching the monitors. Her pulse spiked at every flash of movement, every shadow that might be Orloff's men. And then, she saw him. Orloff. Standing, smirking, arrogant, thinking he had the upper hand. Dominic's hand tightened around his weapon. His gaze burned through the monitors, cold and precise. "He's about to learn what it means to cross me." Seconds stretched, impossibly long, as Dominic closed the distance, moving faster than any human should. His presence wasn't just felt, it was imposed, a force that demanded attention, respect, and fear. Orloff's men faltered, unsure, sensing the predator descending upon them. And then Dominic struck. A blur of movement, controlled violence, and absolute authority. Every shot, every command, every strike was perfectly executed. Orloff's confidence wavered. For the first time, he realized he was facing a man who couldn't be intimidated. Back in the safehouse, Lena's hand shook, but not from fear. She watched Dominic dismantle Orloff's empire in real time, every action a testament to the man she had begun to see not just as dangerous but as her shield. Her pulse raced, not just from the adrenaline, but from the undeniable pull she felt toward him, a force neither of them could name aloud. Finally, the chaos fell silent. Orloff lay cornered, defeated, stripped of his power, forced to look up at the man who had dismantled everything he thought he controlled. Dominic stood over him, every line of his body radiating authority and danger. "You thought you could touch what belongs to me," Dominic said, voice low, lethal. "You thought you could threaten my world and leave unscathed. You were wrong." Orloff's smirk faltered. I. Dominic didn't let him finish. He stepped closer, eyes burning. "Next time, think carefully before you choose your enemies. Because I don't just protect what's mine, I annihilate anyone who tries to take it." Orloff's silence said more than words ever could. Dominic turned away, not gloating, not satisfied but resolute. His gaze found Lena and Darren waiting behind the monitors. And in that moment, Lena realized something profound. The most dangerous man in Chicago had become the most steadfast protector in her life. And she understood, with a clarity that made her knees weak, That nothing, not fear, not power, not the darkness of the city, could separate them now. Subscribe now to witness Dominic's final move against Orloff. Comment "Justice served" if you're ready for the aftermath and peace for Lena and Darren. The first light of dawn filtered through the windows of the safe house, soft and pale against the darkness of the night that had just passed. Chicago looked peaceful from above, unaware of the storm that had raged in its streets, and of the man who had bent that storm to his will. Dominic leaned against the window, arms crossed, jaw tight, eyes scanning the city with the vigilance of a predator who never truly rested. Lena and Darren sat nearby, the weight of adrenaline slowly giving way to exhaustion. Darren's bruises had begun to fade. Lena's hands no longer shook as violently. "You did it," Lena whispered, voice barely audible. She kept her gaze on him, not knowing whether to admire him or fear him, or both. "You saved him. And us." Dominic didn't respond immediately. He exhaled slowly, a tension-filled pause that spoke more than words ever could. Finally, he said, "It's not over. There's always someone like Orloff. Someone who thinks they can take what isn't theirs." She nodded, understanding, but her attention was on him. Not the darkness he fought, but the man he was when he chose to protect, when he chose to be more than just a force of destruction. "You could have walked away," she murmured. "Could have left me, left Darren." He finally turned to her, his gaze intense, piercing. "And let them touch what belongs to me? Not a chance. You and Darren. You're my responsibility. My choice. And I don't fail at what I choose." Her chest tightened at the words. Dangerous, terrifying, and impossible are words, but not empty. She had seen the proof. He had moved through fire and shadow, through chaos and blood, and brought them back. Alive. Whole. Untouchable. Darren spoke, voice small but firm. "Thanks, Dominic, for saving me." Dominic's eyes softened slightly, a rare glimpse of humanity behind the storm. "You're my family now, Darren. That's all that matters." Lena felt something shift inside her. The fear, the tension, the danger. It was still there, but beneath it, a fragile thread of something stronger. Trust. Connection. Maybe even hope. Dominic stepped closer, and for a moment, the weight of the world seemed to condense into the space between them. He didn't touch her, not yet, but the heat radiating off him was impossible to ignore. "You don't have to be afraid anymore," he said, voice low, almost intimate. "Not while I'm here." She swallowed, heart racing, pulse erratic. The man who could destroy everything had become the one thing she didn't want to live without. And in the quiet aftermath, she realized that the world could be as dangerous as it wanted. But Dominic Rossi was her shield. Her reckoning. Her impossible, terrifying, undeniable truth. Outside, the city woke, unaware. But inside the safe house, Lena, Darren, and Dominic had survived the storm. And in that survival, something unspoken, unshakable, and dangerously real had begun. Subscribe now to see Lena, Darren, and Dominic find their next chapter of safety and strength. Comment "Protected forever" if you want to stand with them as their story continues. The city had returned to its rhythm, lights flickering on as if nothing had happened. But Dominic Rossi didn't live in ordinary time. He moved in the spaces between danger and control, in moments when life and death hung by a thread. The safe house was quiet now. Darren slept in a room down the hall, finally able to rest without fear. Lena sat alone in the living area, her thoughts a whirlwind. The night's chaos still echoed in her chest, the gunfire, the shouting, and Dominic's presence like a living storm. He appeared beside her without a sound, as if he had materialized from the shadows themselves. The air shifted, tense and heavy, and she realized she hadn't truly exhaled since the fight began. "You can relax now," Dominic said, voice low but firm, as though speaking would make the world bend to him. Lena began, but words faltered. There was too much. Too many emotions tangled together. Fear, relief, admiration, and something more dangerous, an undeniable pull toward him. Dominic's gaze softened, just slightly. He leaned against the wall opposite her, keeping a careful distance, yet every inch of him radiated the kind of danger that made her pulse spike. "I kept my promise. Darren is safe. You are safe. No one touches what's mine. Her lips parted. You didn't have to do all of this. You could have walked away, Dominic. You could have. I don't walk away, he interrupted, eyes burning. Not from you. Not from what I've chosen. The words settled in the room like a quiet thunder. She felt them deep in her chest, the gravity of the man beside her, the force of someone who could destroy anything but chose to protect. She took a careful step toward him. Why me? Dominic's jaw flexed. For a long moment he said nothing, as if even breathing the answer was dangerous. Then, finally, because someone like you, someone pure, unbroken, walked into my world. And for the first time I wanted to be worthy of it. Worthy of you. Her knees threatened to give out. She couldn't breathe. She wanted to run and stay and fall into his arms all at once, but the power between them was undeniable, magnetic, and terrifying. Dominic stepped closer, close enough that she felt the heat radiating from him, but stopped just short. Respectful, restrained, and lethal even in stillness. I can't promise a life without danger, he said softly. But I can promise that as long as I'm here, you won't face it alone. She swallowed, words failing her, as realization settled in. The man who could annihilate a city, who could crush anyone in his path, had chosen her. Had chosen to be her shield, her reckoning, her impossible, unstoppable force. Outside, Chicago breathed. Inside, Lena understood the truth. She didn't need to fear Dominic Rossi. Not entirely. He had become something else entirely. Something she didn't want to live without. And in that silent, charged moment, the world felt smaller, safer, and impossibly, undeniably theirs. Dominic's hand hovered near hers, not touching but promising. You belong here. With me. And I'll make sure no one ever takes that away. Her lips finally curved in a small, unsteady smile. I believe you. And for the first time, Lena let herself feel it. The terrifying, exhilarating certainty that the most dangerous man in Chicago was no longer her enemy, but her protector, her shield, and something she couldn't and wouldn't let go. The night faded. The danger hadn't vanished, but she was no longer alone. Not while Dominic Rossi stood in her world. Subscribe now to witness Lena and Dominic's next chapter, where danger meets devotion. Comment together always if you stand with them as their world, and their bond survives everything. The city had calmed. Chicago's streets were alive with normalcy again. Streetlights flickering, traffic humming, and the distant sound of life going on as if the night of chaos had never existed. But inside the safe house, life felt different. Darren sat at the small kitchen table, sipping coffee slowly, still pale but smiling for the first time in weeks. Lena leaned against the counter, watching him, a sense of peace settling over her. No one was chasing them. No one was threatening them. For now they were safe. Dominic sat in the living area, arms crossed, eyes scanning the city through the large windows. Even in peace, he carried the weight of the world, but it wasn't oppressive now. It was controlled, focused, protective. Lena walked over carefully and placed a hand on his arm. He didn't flinch, didn't pull away. Instead, his gaze softened when it met hers. You're quiet, he said, low and deliberate. I'm just noticing, she admitted. How calm it is. How safe it feels. With you. Dominic's lips curved slightly, a rare, genuine smile. It won't always be like this, he said. Danger doesn't disappear. But right now we have this. And I intend to protect it. For you, for Darren, for as long as I can. Lena let herself relax into the moment. No threats looming, no shadows waiting outside. Just the quiet understanding that the man who could destroy worlds had chosen to stand by her as her shield, her protector, and the one she could trust with everything she couldn't say aloud. Darren glanced between them, a small grin spreading across his face. You too, you're unstoppable. Dominic's eyes flicked to Lena, and for a brief second, the world outside didn't exist. We're stronger together, he said. And in the soft morning light, Lena realized something she hadn't allowed herself to before. Danger might always exist, and darkness would always lurk, but as long as Dominic Rossi was there, she, her brother, and even the fragile fragments of her world could survive anything. Because some storms didn't destroy, they protected. And Dominic Rossi was her storm. Subscribe now to follow Lena, Darren, and Dominic as they rebuild, survive, and face whatever comes next. Comment, "The storm protects," if you believe some forces exist to shield the people worth saving. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazy and intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out.